Welcome back to Green is Good, and I'm so excited to have my friend on as our second guest, Leo Raudys. Leo is the founder and the social entrepreneur and conscious capitalist behind Riduvit. Welcome back to Green is Good, Leo Raudys.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Hey, Leo, even though I know the story and I know you for many years now, I want you to share with our listeners the backstory of who Leo Raudys is, where you've been, and how you got to become now a conscious capitalist, a social entrepreneur, really changing the world with your great new company, Riduvit.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot to say, but I'll just boil it down to the essentials. I've spent most of my adult life in the environmental protection field, primarily on the regulatory side, but I moved over into the private sector, about 5-6 years ago to focus on some trends that I thought were pretty compelling around electronic waste and the need to more properly manage all that stuff that we're generating as a culture. So spent just quite a bit of time, again, on the regulatory side, working policy, helping to make the world a better place, and went on to do, I think, some interesting things on the business side. And that leads me to where I am today, and decided to found a company that focuses squarely on trying to help businesses make it easier to recycle electronics.
Well, also, let's be honest here, and you're a very humble guy. I know you for years. You're a great friend, and I'm so excited to have you on because your new business has so much to offer our listeners out there around the world. But before we get there, you were one of the big guys. You were the head of environmental sustainability at Best Buy. And I don't want our listeners to not know that because that's so important. You were both on the public side, then running in a very integral part of one of the most successful take-back programs in all the world, actually. And now you've come to this point with Riduvit.
Yeah, thanks. And my time at Best Buy was extremely rewarding. Just worked with some amazing people and learned quite a bit. But I thought we did some pretty nice things, and I look back on that time very, very fondly.
So now you've done those two pillars of your adult life, the Best Buy experience on the corporate side, your public policy work prior to that, and the public servant work you did. Now, how did you dream up? What was the aha moment or the epiphany to make you create Riduvit? And before we go into that, I want our listeners to go to your website. It's beautiful. It's so well done, and it's also spelled really differently. It's www.riduvit.com. Riduvit, Riduvit.com. Share that epiphany moment or how that aha thing happened for you.
Yeah, well, let me first just tell you what it is, which I think will help you sort of set the stage. So, it's very simply, it's just it's an online platform that makes it easier for companies to find very qualified and cost-effective recyclers to responsibly recycle electronics and IT assets. And, the key word there is responsibly. But, and when I talk about electronics and IT assets, it's what you would typically think of: computers, mobile devices, TV servers. Pretty much anything with a chip or a board in it is the best way to think about what we cover. But as far as, how I came to this idea, over the last 5 years, as you mentioned, I've been deeply involved in efforts to make it easier for consumers to recycle responsibly. And again, responsibly is the key word because, unfortunately, as you know, too often that's still not the case. But, even though it's gotten better over time, there's still a lot of room for improvement on the consumer side of things. But on the business side of things, it's still an extraordinarily confusing landscape. And it's just, it's unfortunate, but it's still too hard for companies to find reliable, responsible recyclers that are also cost effective. And the funny thing is, it's sort of a paradox of choice out there because there are hundreds of recyclers out there on the market, and companies have a hard time making the right choice because there are so many. So they'll either make the wrong choice or they won't make a choice at all. And either one of those choices, in my opinion, is a risk. So what I did was started doing some research in the market and pretty quickly found two things to be true. And we found these things to be true over and over and over again. First, we figured out that companies just don't understand what third-party certification means when it comes to electronics recycling, or why they should even care. So, and specifically, I'm talking about eStewards and R2. These are the two premier third-party certifications for electronics recycling.
Right.
So just a fundamental lack of awareness and understanding. Second is that it's apparent that very few people understand how the industry has been changing over the past few years and why those changes have improved things both on the security side. And when I say security, I mean both data and environmental, but also on pricing. So as business models have evolved, as capabilities have evolved, as companies have gotten bigger and more sophisticated on the recycling side, it's pretty clear that the companies that need those services really haven't kept pace with that. So what does that mean? It means that companies who need recycling services, they're not getting the service they deserve, and they're probably paying too much for it. So, based on these two observations, it led me to conclude that there's a pretty significant market opportunity out there, and it centers around just the notion of simplicity. I know you're a fan of Richard Branson. He talks about complexity being the enemy, and specifically there's this great quote that he has. He says, any fool can make something complicated. It's hard to make something simple, and I completely agree with them. And it absolutely applies to this problem. So I decided to do something about it. I took something that's way too complicated for companies, and I boiled it down to its simplest elements, and those are service, risk, and cost.
That is great. And so let's talk about that. What are the costs of using your great website? And again, for the listeners who just joined us, we've got my friend on, Leo Raudys. He's now an entrepreneur who has started a website, www.riduvit.com, RIDUVIT.com. Talk a little bit about the cost of service and what you're providing with this great website.
Yeah, well, it's free to use, and that's part of the beauty of it. If you're a company that needs to find a responsible recycler, you can use it for free to get connected with companies that I think are the best in the business. So, no commissions, no membership fees. The ultimate cost of any recycling project or program is going to depend on a number of factors. So you can imagine if you're a company that has a load of electronics assets, whether it's servers or iPads or devices, et cetera, based upon where they are, what kind of service they need, and what that material is, it's going to cost them X or Y or Z. But the cost to use the service to get in touch with those recyclers and to find the best in the business is free. So, the way I look at the value that we're able to provide companies that use us is they can essentially take comfort in knowing that they're working with recyclers that have been vetted. We have all their certifications on file. I've visited the facilities, and I know the people very well. And for companies that have a lot of other things to do, they're running a business. They can't necessarily afford the time and the effort and the money to do that vetting. So we do that for them essentially for free.
So this goes back to your history, though, because both as a regulator and a business leader, this is sort of the convergence and culmination of all of your experience in that the companies that you're pointing people to. You also know the pitfalls and the real bad things that could happen if people recycle their electronics incorrectly. Can you share that a little bit? Because, it used to be all about the environment, and it still is in many ways, Leo, but can you share a little bit about what's going on now with regards to data protection, and whether you're the person on the street or a government agency, a small company, or a big publicly traded company that warehouses lots of information for lots of your clients? How does this all play into the great model that you've created at Riduvit.com?
Yeah, thanks. I definitely lean on my experience as a past regulator and enforcer of regulations to think about how I approach this business. In the case of electronics recycling, this is just a huge issue. So, if I go back to the time that I spent as a regulator, I can tell you that I've seen the good, I've seen the bad, I've seen the ugly, and everything in between. And, the truth of the matter is that, whether it's recycling or any business, there are good actors out there and there are bad actors out there, and then there's just a whole lot that's in between. And unfortunately, when it comes to recycling electronics and IT assets, the margin of error is extremely thin. You mentioned data security issues. That's just a huge risk that companies are having to manage, particularly today. And there's no excuse for taking risks with customer or company data by improperly recycling or liquidating old products. So just think about all the news around data breaches lately. It's only going to continue, and the sad fact is that cyber criminals are always going to find the easiest ways to steal your data. And the analogy I like to use is, if you leave your door open when you leave for work in the morning, you think about that in the context of recycling. Improperly recycling or liquidating electronics, it's like leaving the door open, and it's leaving it open to trouble, and eventually it's going to walk right in and it's going to do something bad.
Let's talk a little bit about the possibilities. When you were envisioning Riduvit, who are your potential target markets that you're looking to guide the right way and advise the right way in terms of responsibly disposing of their electronic equipment and waste?
Yeah, well, the universe can potentially be pretty broad. I mean, any company that has electronics or IT equipment to recycle can use this service. But for our purposes, for the first year, we're targeting specifically a handful of sectors. So we're targeting banks, law firms, retailers, the telecom industry, and the hospitality industry. And the reason we're focusing on those industries first is that they tend to have more dispersed operations and can probably more greatly benefit from the scale that we bring to bear. So all the recyclers that we work with are national in scale, so we can cover the entire continental U.S. So that's our target market. And I should also mention that we also provide this service for liquidating electronic products. So if you think about retailers as an example that have to liquidate returned or damaged electronics, and this could be quite a bit of material, there are liquidation channels out there that do that work, and some of them are not third-party certified, which I think is pretty important from a risk management perspective. And so we provide a service to more I would say responsibly and at a lower risk liquidate those electronics that have to go out the back door of a retailer. I just can't imagine any CEO these days that doesn't spend at least a part of his or her day thinking about data security and how to avoid having a problem. And I think we feel that our service is a way of giving some peace of mind.
Well, if we all think about sustainability as a global issue, but we say think globally, act locally. What's more local than the cell phone or the iPad or the laptop in our possession as to how to dispose of our own things just as people, as concerned people, correctly? And then when you start thinking about environmentally, as you say, responsibly, which I think is the best way of putting it, recycling things responsibly, then thinking about our own personal data, you scale that up to any company that we all work for or are involved with or know. I think then almost everyone becomes your potential universe of clients down the road. Is that not true?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exactly for those reasons. And it really does come down to those two compelling risk issues, the environment and data. And each of them presents its own particular set of problems. And absolutely, we live in a global economy, and all these products that we're talking about, they move around the world as global commodities. But the fact of the matter remains that all too much of it still moves around without the appropriate security and environmental control. So if you can imagine, if you're disposing of some sort of electronic device and it ends up in a place in the world that you don't want it to end up in, bad things can happen, either to the data or, from an environmental perspective, because it's just not being managed properly. So it's definitely a problem that's still out there, and it's I've seen that both as a regulator and in my work at Best Buy. And I hope that we continue to make progress in solving what's, I think, some pretty compelling problems.
What changes are you seeing? What trends do you have visibility on that you feel will help make Riduvit even more compelling as the months and years ahead of us continue to roll forward?
Well, I'd say it's two things. One is that the global IT spend is still pretty healthy. Some of the estimates I've seen show that well north of $400 billion is going to be spent worldwide on IT purchasing. So that's new stuff, and new stuff replaces old stuff. So that means that there's a lot of equipment that's going to need recycling. So
right.
I think it just feeds the overall growth in what's still already a pretty healthy and large e-waste recycling market. So that's the first thing.
Right.
And then the second one is what we've just been talking about, which is this increasing emphasis on data security. So I believe that there are going to be many more companies out there asking a lot harder questions about where their electronics are going and who's handling them. And I think, in years past, maybe even months past, many companies could get away with just doing what they would normally do. I just don't think that that's going to continue. I think there's just a much greater demand for data security and transparency around where things are going. And I think that's just going to drive more business our way.
Leo, last week in Washington, D.C., there was a hearing on electronic waste. One of the senators held a hearing. Can you share a little bit about what's going on with regards to the federal government, the GSA, and this issue of cybersecurity around electronic waste and, again, responsible recycling of electronic waste? What's the connection between what's happening with the federal government, U.S. federal government, and cybersecurity, and what Riduvit is doing and wants to continue to do and grow with?
Yeah, I think at a policy level, things are moving forward slowly in bits and pieces. And unfortunately, we haven't really been able to land on a national regulatory framework for e-waste recycling. I think there are some protections in place, but I think pretty much anybody who knows anything about this area believes that more can be done, that there needs to be a national framework similar to what's happened in half of the states in the United States. So the hearing recently was, once again, an opportunity to talk about what needs to happen on a policy level to get a better handle and control on where this stuff is going and making sure that it's responsibly recycled. But the very interesting thing from my perspective is what's happening on the cybersecurity side. So the federal government issued a cybersecurity framework a few weeks ago that they've been working on for quite some time. And it's a fairly simple approach, I think, and it's just basically a framework for managing cybersecurity risk. But what I was very happy to see was that the framework specifically called out the need to have formal approaches for managing the disposal and recycling of IT assets. So, I think that's going to move companies more and more in the direction of having formal processes set up and paying more attention to who they're using on the back end to recycle their goods because it's being called out as a potential security threat.
We're down to the last 2 minutes for our budding and growing audience who wants to be entrepreneurs, that want to be the next Leo Raudys, who want to change the world for the better and make the world a better place. Any good hints on how to get involved and how to be a conscious capitalist or a responsible entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, I would just say that you just have to pursue your passion with a tremendous amount of dedication and recognize the fact that there is really an enormous opportunity out there in areas that provide a significant social and environmental benefit. So, if you have a passion for that type of work and you have an area of expertise that aligns with that, just go for it and pour your heart and soul into it, and I think you'll find success. And I think that's true in any endeavor, but certainly, when it comes to developing businesses in the social environmental space, I think it really comes from a point of passion.
Right, and that's a perfect way to leave today. I'm so happy, Leo, you came back on Green is Good, and now with your new venture, and I can't wait to have you back on to discuss how it's evolving and how it's growing. I'm sure it's going to be a massive success. And for our listeners out there, again, who want to use Leo's great new website, please go to www.riduvit.com, RIDUVIT.com. Leo Raudys, you continue to be a sustainability superstar and are truly living proof that green is good.